And if you become 1% better every day because of the power of compounding interest, at the end of the year, you're actually like 37 times better than you are today.
Welcome to the Leader Diaries podcast, where your story is a diary worth sharing. It's your host, Justin Mohabir, and I'm the CEO of Being Present, where your feet are being planted. And today we have a very special guest, Miren Oca, the founder and CEO of Ocaquatics.
Yes, well, I'm really excited to be here too, Justin. And it is a really funny story of how we met. And I think everybody has an airplane story, but you and I and AJ, my partner, were all sitting in the back row of the airplane flying home from during the holidays. We ran, you were sitting in our row and we just struck up a conversation about, I think you started, just talking to AJ, asking him about, just telling him what you were doing and leadership and your podcast and everything. And then he told me, I had my headphones in and I took them out and I started talking to you and you asked me what book I would recommend reading. And I said, Atomic Habits by James Clear. And you opened your phone and you showed me that you were reading Atomic Habits by James Clear. And then we just talked for a lot of the flight.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, your upbringing, and what inspired you to start your own business.
I didn't start off with the idea of, I'm going to be a business owner. My parents were actually immigrants to the United States, and they opened a restaurant. They had very little. They didn't have a lot of money, but they opened a restaurant. And I watched them work 24/7. They worked so hard. And there were a lot of times where my brother and sister and I would actually go to sleep at the restaurant. And I just, I learned a couple of things by watching my parents. I learned work ethic, and I learned I didn't want to go into business. So I thought, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to get a scholarship because we couldn't afford, to pay the tuition. So I got a scholarship and I went to Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I was getting my degree in biochemistry, and I was going to go to med school and become an orthopedic surgeon. That was my dream. At the age of 19, I got pregnant. And so that detour, I kind of had to make some choices at that time. And I decided to move to Miami and to be closer to my family because my mom was here. It was here in Miami. I'm still in Miami. And I had my son. I did go back to school. And I graduated when he was 18 months old. I actually graduated from University of Miami. And I thought, I'll go to med school later. I can't go to med school right now. And so I decided to do what I knew how to do. I knew how to teach swimming. So I just started teaching swimming. And then I hired somebody. And that was kind of fun. And then I hired somebody else. And that was kind of fun. And it just kept growing little by little by little. And now 32 years later.
So you mentioned you had almost like a front row seat to hard work and diligence at a young age. And
Yes.
then you mentioned your parents were immigrants. Where were your parents originally from?
So my dad was from Spain and my mother's from Cuba. So we grew up speaking Spanish, and I grew up in a smaller town, Lake Charles, Louisiana.
What's that process like when you got pregnant at 19? How was that emotionally? And how did you overcome the outside noise?
Well, Justin, I wish I could tell you, it was such a joyous and happy day when I found out that. But it wasn't, it was hard. It was really hard. And it was stressful. I was a scholarship student at a private university. I had no money. I was taking 18 hours because I needed to make the most of my scholarship. And I was working 2 jobs and both teaching swimming. And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. Money, I need to survive, So I was really stressed, but I made the choice. I owned my decision, and ownership is very important to me, whether it's business ownership or owning your personal decisions. And I owned the situation I was in, and I made the choice. I was going to make the best of this. I was going to move to Miami. I was going to be close to my mom, and I was going to get a job, and I was going to have my son, and then I would go to med school later. That was what I thought I was going to do. And life has such a funny way of working out, so.
Life is all about pivots.
It really is. And detours, pivots and detours.
One of the greatest skills is just being adaptable and having an open mind.
Absolutely. And sometimes those detours, I can't imagine my life. I have had the most extraordinary life. Like, I can't imagine, I have my son, and he's a cool guy. I adore my son. But B is I have this amazing career that has helped me. I've been a leader that's helped create leaders that then they go out and create leaders. Like that is super satisfying and fulfilling work. But also the work that we do, we save lives. We teach children to swim. And in Florida, drowning is the leading cause of accidental death in children ages 1 to 14. That's crazy because the National Institutes of Health have researched and reported that children who participate in formal swimming lessons are 88% less likely to be involved in a drowning. So by doing the work that we do, we are saving lives.
Yeah, talk about following your passion and sticking to it.
Well, it's funny. You just said passion. And a
Yeah.
lot of people say, you followed your passion. This was not my passion. This was not my purpose.
Yeah.
My passion, my purpose, I wanted to go to med school. I wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah.
But honestly, the day I found out I was pregnant, it was like, what am I going to do? And I was kind of lost. But I think it's really important when you're feeling like you don't have a passion or a purpose and you don't know what to do, you have to just keep going. Just make progress. And that's what I was trying to do, is put one foot in front of the other. And suddenly, kind of accidentally, this purpose and this passion emerged. I didn't know this was going to be what I was going to do and what I was going to love doing. And I truly love doing it. I want to grow people to help them so that we can learn, grow, and prosper together. That's really important to me. And I've been able to do that. But it's not something I set out to do. It's something that I found along the way.
So for people who don't have a clear direction in what they want to do or don't know their purpose,
Yep.
how would you encourage them?
I would encourage them to try things, to get up every day and to make forward progress and try things. Life is it's like a list. You're supposed to be making a list that you cross off of things that you don't want to do, So I would get up every day and just try different things and really just see what you like. What's fun for you? What do you like doing? And see if you can make a career or a path out of that. But there are going to be some times it's not clear at all. And you just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep going. And sometimes purpose just, one day you wake up and you realize, wow, look what I'm doing. I love this. This is my purpose.
Well, growing up, what leadership lessons did you learn in the business?
I became the accidental entrepreneur, and there were some things that I didn't want to do exactly the same way my parents did them because I saw them struggle. And I think that it's really, really important, especially a service-based business, to focus on people and help people and bring people along. If you grow people, they will help you grow the business. And if you take care of people, they'll help you take care of the business. And then also, I think that I learned from, maybe they didn't do this, and maybe this is why their business wasn't as strong, but systems. You need a system. You have to build your business as if you were going to franchise it. Pretend that you were going to franchise it to 100 stores and build it and put systems in place, even if you never franchise it or even if you never grow multiple locations, but it'll help you get everything super, super organized and written down. And that'll help you run a better business.
You mentioned systems quite a few times. For people who are not familiar with systems or don't have a system implemented, how would you explain what a system is?
You have a bunch of Olympic athletes, right? Or a bunch of football players. What is their goal? What do they want? What do all these Olympians want?
They want to win the gold medal.
They want to win, right? They all want to win gold. That's their goal. So everybody has goals, and goals are great and they're wonderful. But what are you going to do to get that goal? Every single one of those athletes is going to have a different system. And some are going to have better systems. They're going to eat better. They're going to sleep better. They're going to work out. They're going to never miss a workout. They're going to have a better system, whatever system that is. And that might mean for some people, you can't just say, I'm going to lose weight. Okay. Everybody wants to lose weight. What are you going to do to lose weight? That's the goal. The system is, I'm not going to eat carbs after 8 o'clock. I'm going to fast, or I'm going to stop eating sugar, or, you have to have your system in place. And so the system is, how are you going to reach that goal?
And how does habits tie into the system?
Well, your habits are what you do every day, and we can build some pretty crummy habits, or we can build some really good habits. And habits, they're hard, they're really hard. Okay, it's so funny because you and I were talking about the book, Atomic Habits, right? By James Clear. Such an amazing book. And this is an amazing time to read that book because it's all about building habits and about, becoming 1% better every day. And if you become 1% better every day, because of the power of compounding interest, at the end of the year, you're actually like 37 times better than you are today.
Today's episode is brought to you by Fruits Davy, located in the heart of Broward County, Florida.
If you care about your performance and what you put in your body, Fruits offers fresh smoothies, wraps, acai and salads made with fresh ingredients. They also provide delivery, meal prep, and catering services to keep you fueled all week. Visit them at 2227 South University Drive in Davie, Florida.
What was that moment for you where you had to take like a leap of faith? You didn't know what the other side looked like.
I've been teaching swimming for 32 years now, right? We've been having this business, and we teach about 6,500 swimming lessons per week in high season. So we teach a lot of kids, right? We have 5 locations, but we weren't always like that. For the first 12 years, we were outdoors. I would rent a little country club pool or a little hotel pool or a little, I'd rent these pools. We teach swimming lessons. And it was really hard because sometimes, the weather was really bad, or we get kicked out of a pool because we were bringing in too many people. So one day I woke up and said, if I'm really going to do this, I need to build a pool. I need to get a spot and build an indoor swimming pool. And that was the thing that took so much courage.
How much did it cost to build a pool?
Yeah, a lot. The first pool cost about $750,000.
Wow.
And I didn't own the building. I was renting the building. So I had to make sure I signed a really long lease so that I could be there for a long time. And then as we've been building, I now own 3 of the properties.
So let's talk a little bit about your nonprofit, Ripples of Impact. When did you started it and what inspired you to?
So, I've been running the business for a long time. And on our 30-year anniversary, I transitioned the business to 100% employee ownership. So I no longer own the business. I am the CEO and I'm the founder, but we have 60 owners, 60 owners of Ocaquatics. In July of 2024, I was starting to think about, okay, what's next? What am I going to do? And I've always talked to businesses about how it's more than just making a profit, right? I'm talking about using business for good, about a B Corp certification. And so I started to really think about Ripples of Impact. ROI stands for Ripples of Impact. What does ROI stand for in the business world? Return on investment. So everybody thinks ROI is return on investment. I feel like, yes, we have to have a return on our investment. We also have to we can create ripples of impact. We get this opportunity to do that. And ripples are started with pebbles. And so every day you're making decisions. And when you make a decision, that's a pebble. You're dropping a pebble. If you chose to mentor someone, you're dropping a pebble, and it's going to create ripples. And that person you're mentoring is going to go off and just create these other things. Other things are going to happen because you're mentoring them. If you say hello to somebody, at the grocery store, that's dropping a pebble, and it's ripple, because they might turn around. They might have been having the worst day, but then they turn around and they smile at the cashier, or they're nicer to somebody because you were nicer to them.
It reminds me that a great leader produces leaders.
I'll tell you what, we have 5 locations.
Yeah.
We know who the strongest manager is by how many leaders, how many people are becoming leaders and getting a leadership team. That's how we can tell our strongest managers, because that means they're pouring into their team, they're helping them grow. And the manager that grows more leaders, we tell people, train your replacement. So train someone to replace you so that then you can continue to grow in leadership.
So you mentioned employee ownership. So for those of us who don't know what employee ownership is, explain that to us.
Okay, so I basically got my business and I sold it to a trust. And so now the beneficiaries of the trust are the employees who qualify at Ocaquatics. We use a model, it's called the Employee Ownership Trust. And what it means is at the end of the year, if we have $100 left, we take the money that's left, we make sure all of the expenses are paid, we put some into reserves, and a reserves account is a savings account in case, anything comes up. We put some money into a capital expenditure fund, which is like if an air conditioning breaks, we just have a fund of money there that we can go to. And then all the rest of the money that's left, all that profit gets distributed amongst the co-owners. So this year, everybody got a check at the end of the year, which was about 4.5% of their salary. So that was their share of the profit at the end of the year. And we do that every year. At the end of the year, we share all the profit that's there. It doesn't come to me anymore. It goes to the employee owners.
When it comes to hiring the right people, what are some traits or characteristics you look for?
It's a really good question, because sometimes when people get in a bind and they really need people, they hire anybody, right? And we've all been to the grocery store or to an office store or something, and you can tell that the person behind the counter does not like their job, right?
Oh yeah, they're miserable.
They're miserable. Shows me what leadership, I mean, that's a reflection on leadership. Okay. That right there, because a good leader would help people see the value of their work. Like, it's so important that you're here today. Thank you for being a cashier, because people need to buy food and they're taking this home to, you know, make nourishing meals for their families. And we're so glad you're here. By saying that to a cashier, it kind of changes. I'm not just here punching numbers into a, so I think it's showing people their purpose and showing people their value at work. That's really important. So when we hire people, we're looking for people who they have good energy. We can tell they're nice people. Again, it's kind of those same leadership qualities, but we want people who look happy to be in. They walk in the door and they're not just sitting on their phones looking at the phones. They're actually looking around at the kids saying, this is fun. I want to be here. And again, remember, I mentioned to you, they don't even have to know how to swim. We can teach swimming. We're really good at that. But I can't teach somebody to be really happy and positive and want to work hard, Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
So you would, let's say there's a high performer, like a swim instructor.
Yes.
They're amazing at their job, but their attitude is just poor.
Yes.
What are you doing?
Justin, that's an amazing question. I'm so glad you asked that. We would let them go.
Yeah.
We would coach them. We would mentor them. We would work as much as we could. Like, we would talk to them. We try to say that when we let somebody go, nobody's surprised. They're never surprised when we let them go, because we've had so many coaching opportunities with them. We've talked to them. We've put them on performance improvement plans. We've talked about what we need and why we want them to be that person. But if they can't be that person, we're going to let them go to go find a job somewhere where they can be the star of the show. Because it sounds like sometimes, every once in a while, it hasn't happened often, but we'll have a swimming teacher who's amazing, but they're not an amazing team member. And we're looking for great team members. And so we'll let them go so they can be the star somewhere else. Because at Ocaquatics, the team is the star. And that sounds pretty cheesy and dorky, but that's kind of who we are. Like, we really are like that. And if it's evident when you walk into our locations, we have an amazing team and people love work. I mean, we've had people get married at work. We've had, they meet their partner, or they, it's just so funny because we hire really great people.
You gave an example with the cashier and the cashier being miserable over the counter and how that's a reflection on leadership. I want to pick your brain a little bit. So what would you say to the janitor that comes and picks up garbage?
Yeah.
Like, how would you motivate that person?
Okay. So our custodians have been with us for probably 10 to 15 years. And there's a story of JFK, a president long time ago, who was walking through NASA, and he ran into a janitor, and he asked the janitor, "What are you doing?" And the janitor said, the custodian said, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." Because by the work he was doing, he was helping keep the offices clean and organized so that then people could come into their offices and do the work they were doing to help put the man on the moon. Right? Does that make sense?
Right.
And, so you have to you have to show people the path. If you're a custodian at a hospital, that's an incredible job, because you have to make sure that the rooms are so clean that infection cannot get into a room where a child might be sick. Their work is so important, and you have to just show them why it's important, that they're helping to save this little boy's life because, he can't get an infection because he's sick. And so help clean the room. And then that makes your job more fulfilling and more worthwhile. You know why you're doing what you're doing.
I have this popular saying. I said, treat the janitor the same way you treat the CEO.
Absolutely. Yes. I'll tell you a funny story. I used to do all of my interviews at Starbucks. I used to do all my job interviews. So I would sit down and people would line up for job interviews, and I'd have a Starbucks card and I would say, go get yourself a drink and then come back and sit down and we'll do the interview. But before, I would talk to the baristas and I would say, you're going to give me the thumbs up or the thumbs down on how they treat you.
I never heard of anything like this. Yeah.
It's how you ask. Do you say please and thank you? Is it, you're asking for a latte, is it, may I have a latte, please? Or is it, yeah, give me this, and they don't treat them, they don't look them in the eye and they don't talk to them. I want people using please and thank you. That's not very common anymore, but I want somebody who looks you in the eye and appreciates the work you're doing. So yeah, so pretty funny. We used to do that.
We're going to transition into a lightning round question. What is your favorite leadership quote?
Do you know the author Robert Frost? He said he learned something earlier in his life, and that it's a super simple quote. Life goes on. There are really hard times in your life, and sometimes you just don't know what to do. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? You just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And so there were some times in my life I had to say, life goes on. Just keep going. Keep going. You can do this. You can pick yourself up and keep on going. And I might add to that quote, and it gets better. It really does get better. If you're consistent, you're making good choices, you're thinking about your pebbles and WMI, what's most important, it usually gets better.
That's good. And what would you say is your favorite leadership book?
Well, right now I really like Atomic Habits, James Clear. I have a ton of books behind me. I really like Integrity by Henry Cloud. It's a really good book. And then I have to throw a bonus book in there. A book that I read probably 28 years ago that helped my business so much is called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And it's about setting systems up in your business. That is what helped me start to build those systems.
When the clock hits 0, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as a good mom, as a good parent, as a good partner to AJ. But I also want, my purpose is to spread the spirit of positive leadership and create opportunities for us to learn, grow, and prosper together. And I want people to know or to think that I was an influence in their life. It's that what you said about John C. Maxwell talking about leadership as influence. I hope that I was able to make their life more positive because, our paths crossed.
That's powerful. And I'm super grateful that our paths crossed.
It was so great. It's been really fun, and we could talk forever. So this was great. This was a really fun conversation.
This is the Leader Diaries podcast, where your story is a diary worth sharing.